Greetings one and all, I'm Red Angel and welcome to another episode of I Love It Anyway, a series where I talk about media that I love that is inherently flawed, but I enjoy it despite this fact. A pseudo-review and analysis, if you will. So let's talk about Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers, shall we? First, let's discuss the low FPS elephant in the room. Does it have more frame rate issues compared to the original game? Yes. For some reason, this is true on all platforms. Is it noticeable? Moderately. Since I've played Chrono Cross before, I'm used to it being on the slower side. The original game never ran as well as other titles did on the PS1. It's clear the effort was put into the timey-wimey Jeremy Bearimy
You get it. This broke me.
story rather than the product's performance. Meanwhile, this version upgraded the visuals, rearranged the music, and added to the story. It also includes Radical Dreamers, a choose-your-fate style visual novel that had never been released in the States prior to this. That's it. It's a port that could have used more love in the performance department, I'll give you that, but there's other reasons to avoid Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers. If anything, wait till it's on sale if this is the main sticking point as to why you're avoiding giving this classic JRPG a shot. One of the unique things about Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers is that it adds the Radical Dreamers game with your purchase, essentially giving you 2 games for around $20 US. Before this, the Western world had to rely on fan translations to experience Radical Dreamers. Now, there's an official translation that finally lets Western audiences experience the complete story. It's nice to have the official version of the tale, which is an alternate version of our main heroes, or a pseudo-prequel, if you will. It gets a little confusing, fair warning. Dreamers aside, let's talk about Chrono Cross as a whole, shall we?
Spare ribs!
Originally released in November of 1999 on the PlayStation 1, Chrono Cross is one of those games that's either praised to high heaven or derived due to its connection to another, much more well-known classic, Chrono Trigger. Fun fact, I've never played Chrono Trigger. I was confused and sometimes lost when certain characters talked about portions of Chrono Trigger lore, and when I say lost, I mean lost. There are sequences in which I essentially had to piece together the connections between the weird timelines presented in this game, especially if you get certain endings that further muddy your understanding of the game's universe. Enjoying this without prior knowledge to Chrono Trigger is possible, yet you'll still need clarification depending on the ending. The story goes as follows. Serge, or Sergei, depending on how people pronounce it now, is a young man living his best life in Arni Village. He's popular, has a cute girlfriend, and has completely suppressed his Panther-related trauma from years ago. And then Serge slips through the veil between his world and another world, in which he died to his Panther-related trauma. And the entire world around him is vastly different from the world he knew. He must find a way to get back to his world and set his timeline right. He can't set his timeline right that easily. I wish the plot was that simple. The cat came back the very next day, and the strange Panther Man was trying to find something called the Frozen Flame, which is of great interest to everyone, but mostly to Kid, a scrappy young Australian-coded young girl who aggressively wants to join you to kill Lynx because he set her orphanage on fire for a spoilerific reason. Nyan? I guess? The more you dig into Chrono Cross's plot, the more complicated everything else gets, especially with a cast of 45 recruitable characters. You'd expect that some are more important to the story than others. Outside of Serge and Kid, there are some characters that have boss fights dedicated to their place in the narrative. Some characters have actual knowledge of what's going on in this twisted plot, and how we could put the world back together. Then there are some characters like Fungi who aren't having a fun time, and are never once relevant to the story at large, outside of making you feel guilty for your actions. Listen man, I only wanted to recruit you. I didn't know you'd be trapped in endless torment, but, welcome to the party? Ooh. I'd like to note the music is one of the game's highlights and, personally, one of my favorite soundtracks in any sort of RPG I've ever played. Despite everyone's fears, the music has only been remastered. If you're like me and you'll hear the difference, I can safely say that the updated songs work extraordinarily well. They sound crisp and will immerse you in the world. I would find myself getting lost in the world of Chronopolis just to find new tracks to listen to. are updated songs on a vinyl release of this soundtrack if anyone is interested. As for the original soundtrack, to quote Yasunori Mitsuda, he says, "I haven't touched them at all." Now, the battle system is where Chrono Cross gets interesting and divisive. It's based on elements separated in different colors: red, blue, green, white, yellow, and black. Red is weak to blue, blue is also strong against red. Each character has an innate element that determines what sort of attacks they're weak to. Bring a character with a red element to a blue boss fight. The blue boss will take double damage, but so will your character. Their innate colors determine what color their signature techs are, which are essentially signature moves. Some characters have natural synergy with other characters, which can unlock dual techs at star levels. Oh, right. So, in Chrono Cross, leveling the typical RPG way. First, you gain star levels by defeating bosses. Once you do that, it levels up all your characters except those in the battle who gain bonus stats for defeating the beast. Now, you must be wondering, okay, then how do I grind then? Well, that's sort of the problem with the way Chrono Cross does stats. Monsters will sometimes give you stats and bonuses to you in your current party, but those stats don't apply to the rest of the party in similar boss fights. The issue lies in the fact that not every enemy gives stats. They're designed to give materials for you to craft weapons and armors and accessories for all of your characters. Different armors and accessories improve your defense, attack power, resistance, and evasion, so they're more of a consistent booster of stats than the enemies themselves. The way Chrono Cross upgrades characters' stats is a challenge that is frankly a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a unique way of gaining stats and assures you that the player is seldom over-leveled for a boss fight. On the other hand, there's no denying that if you consistently use the same characters, they'll be able to throttle a boss fight that should have taken a lot longer to defeat. The bonus stats from boss fights do matter, and despite what you may read on GameFAQs or Reddit or otherwise, it is worth it to fight random encounters on the off chance you'll get extra stats and for a side mission that shows up later in the game. I want to think that there were determining factors on whether or not certain characters tanked through a hit or were one-shot by an enemy. That said, that would require me to go through the stats of each character and look at each monster and what stats it would give me, then look at how much time I spent leveling each character and the divided by square root of squaresoft and... Okay. This is the issue I have with Chrono Cross. As someone who overthinks these sort of things, the numbers of choices and possibilities you have through each playthrough can make decision paralysis relatively easy. However, I know people like choices in games, and while the amount of customization you have in your own story is arguably Chrono Cross's biggest strength, it can be considered its greatest weakness, because if you aren't reading a guide on this game, you will realize how many things you missed in terms of character stats, items, special attacks, dialogue options, and endings. This title encourages you to replay it, which is fine in theory. Many games are like this, right? However, Nier Automata requires multiple playthroughs to get the whole story, and that is a beloved modern-day classic. Where I think Chrono Cross falters is in the fact that because it is a multi-timeline spanning piece that it is, the amount of time you spend to unlock each playthrough and all of the endings feels like you can mess up at any time, which of course requires multiple saves, which newer players may or may not realize. I do, but I'm a woman in my 30s who's been playing video games since she was 4. Believe it or not, I have some experience with these sort of things. According to How Long to Beat, the average completionist time is 68 hours in Chrono Cross, yet that doesn't even factor if you're taking your time in your game, which can equal up to 100 hours, which is expected from a JRPG from this era, so it makes sense. However, it's the number of endings that can make this journey a little more daunting than most. So, how many endings are there in the great classic Chrono Cross? 12.
What?
This game has 12 endings. I think that's more endings than Shadow the Hedgehog.
No! Chaos bless!
This is the end of you, and the end to my cursed past.
Jokes aside, this is considered irritating for me because of how Chrono Cross is designed with the boss fights and the random encounters. Even with the fast forward button and a guide, going back and forth and fighting the Time Devourer over and over again borders on tedious. So yes, there is more content to be had, but because of the format of said content, Chrono Cross drags itself out a lot longer than it needs to. All that said, Despite my reluctance to get into RPGs from the PlayStation 1 era, Chrono Cross has weaseled its way into my heart. I didn't play this game until I was in my 20s, so I have no true childhood nostalgia for it. Still, I look at it fondly because I was intrigued at how the battle system worked, and the story, however confusing it might have been for me at the time, had me fully invested. I think Surge is one of the best uses of the silent RPG protagonist, because despite the fact he doesn't speak, there are emotions in the FMV scenes, and his actions speak much louder than his words. The intro sequence and the music that goes with it is still a calming and beautiful experience for me whenever I turn the game on. So while Chrono Cross doesn't have that universal appeal that Final Fantasy VII or X does, it's a fantastic game that I'll revisit from time to time as I get older. I'm Red Angel, and I'll see you next time.